Italy, 73 BC. In the shadows of a golden empire, where marble columns touched the sky and the Senate believed itself eternal, a whisper began. That whisper was not born in a palace or a courtroom, but in a pit of dust and discipline, where men were stripped of their names, their freedoms, and their futures. These were not men the world was meant to remember, but from this forgotten place, a single spark caught fire. His name was Spartacus. And though he was never meant to be remembered, he became a legend the world could never forget. Before he was Spartacus, he was simply a man, a Thracian, born far from the heart of empire, where rolling hills met wild. Forests and freedom was not a luxury, but a way of life. He was a warrior once, fierce and untamed, a man who knew the language of resistance long before he ever saw the grandeur of Rome. But the empire stretched its hand far and wide. He was taken, his sword stripped from him, his choices erased. He was not defeated in battle. He was silenced, chained, and sold. Rome believed that would be the end of his story, but in the Gladiator school of Capua, surrounded by dust, sweat, and commands shouted in Latin, Spartacus did something extraordinary. He listened. He observed the guards, the routines, the weaknesses of a system that thought itself invincible. And more importantly, he saw the others. Men from distant lands, strangers with broken spirits and bent backs. He did not see them as rivals in the arena, but as brothers. And slowly, quietly, he reminded them of something they had all been taught to forget, that they were still human. By day, they trained with wooden swords and were fed hollow dreams of glory in the arena. By night, they whispered in secret, dreaming of something even greater: freedom, dignity, a life not dictated by the cheers of strangers or the whims of nobles, but by the choices of their own hearts. When the moment came, it was not grand or glorious. It was desperate and chaotic, a breakout fueled by instinct and bravery. 70 men stormed through the gates, seized what they could, and fled into the wilderness. But they were not running. They were rising. The Senate scoffed. A handful of runaway fighters was no threat to the might of Rome. But Spartacus had no interest in being a fugitive. He was building something greater than an escape. From the forests and slopes of Vesuvius, a movement was born, the freeborn, the oppressed, the cast aside. They came in hundreds, then thousands. They didn't come for conquest, they came because they believed in something again. They followed Spartacus not because he promised victory, but because he reminded them what it meant to stand with honor. He trained them not as soldiers, but as a force bound by trust and purpose. The hills became their fortress, the valleys their strongholds. Spartacus spoke many times of crossing the Alps and returning to their homes, of ending this uprising with peace rather than war. But each time they tried to leave, Rome blocked their path. Each victory the rebels earned only deepened the Senate's alarm. Spartacus had become more than a name. He was an idea, and Rome feared ideas. Ideas could spread. Ideas could endure long after the last sword was sheathed. In battle, Spartacus showed more than bravery. He showed brilliance. He led without a crown, commanded without cruelty. Where Rome fought for glory and control, he fought for something nobler. And when his followers were discouraged, he lifted their spirits not with promises, but with presence. He walked among them, broke bread beside them, stood in the front lines, not behind them. He was never above his cause. He was the heart of it. As his army grew, so did the pressure. Rome dispatched its finest, armies with polished armor, banners snapping in the wind, tactics honed from centuries of conquest. Spartacus met them, not with fear, but with fire in his heart. His fighters were not uniformed, but they were united. Their strength came not from discipline, but from conviction. And time and again, the impossible happened. Rome stumbled. Its legions fell back. The world paused. Could this band of rebels actually unmake an empire? But Spartacus never sought to destroy Rome. He sought to leave it, to disappear beyond the mountains with those he had led, and return to a world untouched by domination. Yet fate closed in. Supplies ran thin. Some of his own grew restless, hungering for revenge instead of redemption. And behind the walls of the Senate, Rome's most ruthless minds were now focused on one single mission: to silence the name Spartacus forever. And still, Spartacus did not falter. In the final days, as the mountains faded behind them and the plains stretched wide, he called his people together. He did not speak of triumph, nor did he deny the coming storm. He simply reminded them why they began. They were never an army. They were a voice for every soul who had been told they were less, a voice for every hand once chained. They had already won, he said, because they had refused to bow. When the final clash came, it was not about victory. It was about meaning. Spartacus and those who stood with him held their ground, not because they thought they would win, but because they believed some stands are worth everything. That day, they reminded the world that even the most forgotten people, when united by purpose, could bend the knees of kings and emperors alike. Rome would write many stories after that day, but it could never erase Spartacus. His name would live on not in marble, but in memory. His legacy would be carried not by statues, but by generations inspired by courage. Spartacus became a symbol not of rebellion, but of righteousness. A man who could have saved himself, but chose instead to lead others toward the light. And so, long after Rome's temples crumbled and its conquests faded into dust, the story of Spartacus lived. In every act of courage, in every refusal to accept injustice, in every whisper that says, "We are more than they believe," Spartacus rises again. He was not born to change the world, but by refusing to kneel, by choosing honor over fear, he became the spark that reminded humanity what freedom truly means. He did not seek to be remembered, but when the world needed a symbol of hope, it found him. And now, his name is more than history. It is a call to rise, to unite, to never forget the strength that lies within the human spirit. Spartacus was not a legend because he conquered. He became a legend because he refused to be conquered.